My name is Doug Ferriman from Boston, Massachusetts, and just to give you a little bit about my background, myself and my wife have started 3 companies, 2 of them being pizza, and the latest one being a food hall kind of incubator entity where we do have a new pizza concept in it. So we're about to launch our 3rd pizza company. Actually, she's going to launch it. She's going to spearhead the growth on that one, and we've raised money every way possible. Literally from credit cards all the way up to the last company we started, we raised about $16 million, and through a venture capital firm and private equity. So we've kind of covered the gamut of everything and every kind of risk in every aspect. So if you're here to learn about raising capital, taking on risks, taking on partners, what are the pitfalls to avoid, what are the lessons learned, we've learned a lot of hard lessons. And we've had a lot of great decisions, but we made a lot of bad decisions too. And we, they asked me to do this because they know I have the good and the bad on it, and most of it's good. Even the bad stuff, you get really good lessons out of it. So again, if you have questions, speak up. I have seminars where this is more of an interchanging exchange of ideas, and ultimately I'm here to serve you and add value to your Pizza Expo. So feel free to raise your hand on anything. There's nothing off limits here. But again, we've raised money every way possible. My real goal is for you to not get bit by the sharks, because we've left a lot of blood in the water, so to speak, and there's a lot of lessons learned there. So please don't hold back with your questions. I know a couple friends are here today and looking to learn a few tidbits. So ultimately, I'm here to serve, so let me know. So, taking on investment capital. Everybody here, I assume, is looking to grow. Everybody's looking to grow, right? So, how are some of the ways you guys looking to grow? Raising money through investors, obviously. Anybody here kind of going the grassroots way of debt and credit cards and kind of super risky? Anybody raise their hand? Okay, a couple guys. Maybe we'll shift your ideas a little as we go through this. We've done that, and we've, the first company we started was a company called Crazy Dough's Pizza. And a funny story is our accountant for that company actually fired us because it was too stressful for him to actually manage our account. The first year that we opened the 2nd store for that company, literally on credit cards and an SBA loan. And it was a small SBA loan. And we paid about $17,000 in interest the first year on credit cards, and the guy literally wasn't sleeping at night, and he literally fired us. He couldn't handle the risk, and I kept telling him the reward will be there, and you have to believe in it. So definitely want to engage you guys because we've gone through there and we've done that, and it's a little scary, but you maintain control, so you keep your soul in a way. But we're going to talk about a lot of different topics. We have an hour. I've got about 14 slides, so if I get sidetracked, I usually look at my wife and she gives me a signal I get back on track. But I think the magic is in the digression. So if we digress and we find a good tidbit, if we stay there, great. If we don't, we move on. But, ultimately, you have to define the raise that you're trying to accomplish. And if that's city, or regional or national growth, you have to kind of go into your raise, as they say, with a clear and focused mission. And for the last company I started, it was, city growth, national, regional, then national growth. And that was very clear when I did pitch it to private equity people. I say, hey, listen, this idea is good enough, and I see it going, city, regional, national. So that really defined the raise, and the why I presented to them was a powerful why. We had kind of an X factor, which I'll get to. Is to me the dough is the most important thing, and we had this X factor of this crust that was prepared a different way, and it was prepped a different way, and it was cooked a different way, and it ultimately was interesting enough for us to raise a good amount of money. So what's your why? What's your mindset? Did you want to just grow locally? Which is perfectly fine, by the way. Don't get caught up. We all have some sort of ego, but please don't let that be your decision maker You can live a happy, very fulfilled life with city or regional growth. Don't get caught up in the trap of, oh man, my brand has got to be in several different cities up and down the East Coast, because the thinner you get stretched, the more problems you have, and the inconsistencies you have will keep you up at night. And your brand equity and your brand value will suffer. So define that mindset that you want to raise and the growth that you want to achieve, and stick to those goals and set smaller goals. You don't need to be this big entity, because my good friend from Maine over here, very successful pizzeria, and I'm sure he's got some headaches as he grew pretty big, and I know he manages them very well. But define what you want to do, how you want to scale your concept. What are you willing to give up? This is a big question. So how many in here would give up control for the right amount of money? Okay, good. Very few. Don't give up control if you can. All right? There's ways to write contracts where you don't give up the ability to choose your cheese and your sauce and your flour. So even if you give up, say, monetary control, don't give up total control over your product, because the soul of your company really depends on that. And control is a very big thing that we're going to talk about. But obviously selling equity is a big thing. How much time are you willing to give up? Sometimes your soul, and we'll touch on a slide where, I've raised money, I said, for several different companies that I've started, and, some enrich the soul and some kind of suck the soul. And my experience was when I lost control is when I lost some of the soul as well. So some really good life lessons learned there. Your life's going to change either way, and you got to be ready for that. And you have to really be, decisive about what kind of commitment you want to put in. Because when you raise capital, whether it's $200,000 or $2 million or $10 million, that comes with expectation. For you to kind of really, deliver value on that money. And, you have to take that serious, and you have to be ready for it, and you have to be committed to it. So I talked about X factor, right? So this is probably one of the biggest slides in terms of what's gonna really allow you to raise the capital you want to raise, or not allow you to raise the capital. But you need an X factor, and you need that hook, is what I call it. Something that really makes your brand unique and powerful. And unique and powerful are two words that I used in a lot of pitches, because our job as pitch people, pizzerias, pizzeria owners aren't necessarily pitch people, but when I go through this, if you want to raise capital, you have to become fluent in pitching your brand. It has to come naturally out of you, so it becomes authentic. You can't go in, and I did this in the beginning, and I was scared to death, reading from a PowerPoint. You have to have authenticity ultimately, and unique and powerful ideas to kind of raise the money. So you need to have a strong X factor. For us, the last X factor, the company that we started, was the crust. We developed a proprietary technique on how to blend it, how to age it, how to prep it, and that was our decisive X factor. And that allowed us to have reduced labor and use these new technological ovens where you just hit a button. It wasn't the fire, it wasn't the smoke, but it really, the business model and the product ultimately came together as kind of the ultimate X factor for someone to invest in. So in your pitch, in your executive summary, you have to have that concisely written to get that message across of, okay, what's our X factor? What's our differentiation? What is ultimately going to provide, great power to our brand and ultimately value to the investor? Because that's your job. When you raise money, you have to create value. I mean, and we're in the business of creating value every day to our customers. Once you take on investor money, you have to create value for your investor. So, or create value for American Express, in the terms of interest. Either way, but that's not bad, but have a blend of, your high risk kind of raise to your SBA loan. And it's not a bad path. but we'll talk afterwards and we'll go through some of the challenges there. So, you know, why should someone invest in you? Getting back to the X factor, you need a compelling brand and product story. You know, the hook needs to be powerful, and the hook can't just be a hook on paper. You got to back it up. You have to back up your product, your operating model. Today, it's not just about, you know, aging your dough over 60 hours and blending it with a pre-fermented dough. It's really, to me, the survival is that, but it's a lot of it is behind the scenes of your operating model. How many staff do you need? You know, you got to train the oven guy for 4 weeks. What happens if he calls in sick? You know, your operating model is what these people are really going to look at. You know, they're going to be like, okay, they're going to drill you. They're going to be like, okay, how many people does an operator Friday night? What happens if he gets sick? They're going to pressure test you like nobody's business. And they're going to try and poke and prod and find your weaknesses. And we're going to get to a slide where you're going to have to be ready for that. And I'm going to share what I did to get ready for it. And I would recommend following some kind of guideline to do the same. But you got to be ready for it. Any questions so far? No? You guys will loosen up. You guys will be a little quiet right now. That's all right. So, have you guys heard of a pitch deck? So if you guys are looking to raise money if you're going to raise money the private equity way or the venture capital way, they call it a deck. And it's basically a PowerPoint, but it's a concise, you know, set of pages. I say 10 to 15, some get more evolved, but the pitch deck is really the document, the digital format, what an investor can look at for numbers, graphs, executive summary, you know, everything they can learn about you in 10 to 15 pages has to be in that pitch deck. And it has to have a voice. And it's got to be powerful. You know, some of these bullets, this is a really good slide, and I can email this to anybody who wants it. I'm here to share. But it's got to be powerful executive summary, which will help you define your entire presentation. And if you can do that, you know, in the first paragraph, if you can land that hook in the first paragraph, then you've got it really figured out. And you can do that. You know, you got to define your X factor, and you really start thinking about the words and the uniqueness behind it. You can get that one pager or even the first paragraph pretty powerful and concise. I said 10 to 15 pages. One of the biggest things you need to know is know your customers. You guys all know this. But for me, all the pitches I've done, you know, that's some of the first questions that they ask. We're like, okay, who's your customer? You know, and we've developed 3 different companies thus far. The first one was a slice concept. So we located in high foot traffic areas and near hospitals, universities, and downtown. So we had a clear, concise picture of who that customer was. And it was a lot of the 9 to 5 people as a college student. So we geared everything towards that. So really know your customer and know your numbers. I mean, you got to know every person in that market, how many people, what the demographics are. These are the numbers that, you know, savvy investors look at. And they're gonna poke and prod you, as I said, the entire time. And I fumbled tremendously in the beginning. You know, I literally, I've probably given over 1,000 pitches, and I still do. You know, I will get to a slide called the pitch life, and I and myself and my wife truly live the pitch life, where we're always creating and pitching and learning and getting better at it. But you know, you got to practice in the minors to get to the majors. And I was in the minors for a long time. I got a lot of no's, and it's just, every time I did it though, it taught me something. So, you know, who's your market segment? That's a big one, because ultimately, you know, if you're scaling in any city in the country or anywhere in the world, whether it's Tokyo or, you know, India, you have to gain market share. You have to take market share from somebody else. So how are you going to do that? So when I practiced my pitch, and I'll get to that, I'm getting ahead of myself, which I usually do, but I went to one of the biggest venture capital guys in the world, and I faked my way in, and I'll tell the story in a little bit, but, you know, he's the one that told me that. He says, okay, how are you going to take market share from the next guy? And so you have to have a battle plan on how to take market share. And that's one of the biggest things. If you go in to talk to somebody and say, hey, this is our plan to take market share in Kansas or, Albuquerque. We know there's a million pizza places everywhere. Here's our X factor. Here's our operating model. Here's how we take a slice big enough that's going to make you happy, and it's going to fulfill me, and it's going to grow my company. So, how are you going to take market share? As I said, get redlined. Once you design your pitch, mine was pretty shabby looking, but I knew a guy who knew a guy that knew this one guy. And in Boston, this one guy was named Hugh MacArthur, and he is a guy that would go out and buy Dunkin' Donuts or Toys R Us. He worked for a company called Bain Capital. And I literally faked my way into his office through a friend of a friend who was an accountant of his, and I literally, he didn't know, he thought I was really somebody else, and he agreed to meet with me and Melissa, and we showed up to his office, and he instantly knew that he made a mistake, and he has two assistants that are like the president standing next to him, and he gave a signal to one of them, which was obviously a pre-rehearsed signal, and she already started saying, oh, you got to call in with Hong Kong in 10 minutes. So the program to get me out of there was already underway, and I was nervous as hell. But my goal was to get in front of somebody so big that would scare me so much that the next guy wouldn't scare me as much. So for some crazy idea, I got in front of the biggest, scariest guy I could, and he didn't say anything for 15 minutes. He literally let me sit there and suffer for about 15 minutes as I went through the slide, the pitch deck, and then he started taking notes, and I literally couldn't speak. My whole mouth dried up after 15 minutes, and I was like, so what do you think? And terrifying experience for me, but he gave another signal to his assistant, which allowed us 20 more minutes. And then he gave another signal to her. So we went on to an hour, and then he got engaged. So that was a pivotal moment for me. Because I was terrified, so I, overcome a fear of pitching, number one, and he took out his red pen and just started, tearing up the pitch deck. And it was probably the most valuable hour and 10 minutes I've had in terms of raising capital or growing a company or learning from somebody that's grown companies all over the world. And he redlined the thing, and for some reason I got him engaged and was lucky enough to do that. And I learned more things from that guy in an hour that it was amazing. And I'm sharing them today. It's like, know your customer, how are you going to gain market share? Don't open in New York City. It's too difficult. It's too costly. Don't let your ego get in the way of good decisions. And I've seen that, unfortunately, all too often. And, Starbucks didn't open in New York City until they had 230 stores. Because they didn't want to make that commitment until they had the energy and the resources to do it. So the guy gave me 1 million pieces of advice that I still carry today. But what it taught me not to be as scared, and it gave me a little bit of confidence after it, amazingly. But it really gave me, I came up with this term, actionable articulation, and because he literally hammered me with questions. And it kind of triggered this kind of phrase, and that means articulate in a way where it makes people take action. So practice your pitch, develop it so it's concise and clear, and it flows out of you very effortlessly, and it triggers action. That's the goal, is to trigger somebody to take a deeper dive into you. Nobody's going to write you a check on the spot. Everybody does a deeper dive, so you got to be ready for that. You got to be ready for the due diligence. Get all your ducks in a row. Any meals tax you haven't paid, anything like that. They will. You have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
So I wonder if you could maybe comment on the profile of an investor. To me, it seems like you've got your traditional value VCs.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then makes the money. So I'm trying to decide who's the guy that says, oh, you want to start a pizza company. It's traditionally very low margin, right? What's the investment profile that says, sure, I want to write a check on this?
So he asked what the investor profile is for someone like him who wants to grow. Do you want to grow in your city? How many stores do you want to open? How much money do you want to raise?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm probably going to do a tech play on mine, so I'll probably go to the Valley.
Okay.
I'm wondering if I was just going to open up a pizzeria, just say, I want to expand.
Yeah. So when we got started, we were very small scale. So, and when I say small scale, so I went to my inner network of my GC, my electrician, my plumber, the people that build the first store. I say, hey, listen, my advertiser, the local advertiser, so they're all strategic investors. So I say, hey guys, you know, we've worked together, we've opened up a restaurant, we became friends, you know, invest the capital in turn is a cycle where it keeps you in business, it keeps them building the stores. So it was kind of a unique way to raise money. So that is like your, you know, I would say if you're on a spectrum, right, like the Valley VC guys are over here, you know, we started with our friends and family, and they were more strategic, local, small-time investors. It was all $50 up to $100,000 each. And the first raise that we did, we raised about $300,000. And then one company, we went the venture capital world. So we went all the way. And that was more of a bigger kind of growth pitch. So in the beginning, hey, let's open a store. We're not going to sell our soul. We did an 80-20 deal or a 60-40 deal where we give them 60% of the cash flow until they're paid back, and then they go to a residual, you know, 40%, then that trails down to like 10 or 15% over time. So it was an interesting way to do it, but we weren't selling equity. We were
Just getting started. You're probably not funding.
It's harder to go this way when you're getting started. You have to go SBA, you know, we did credit cards. We did, you know, our strategic small-time investors, our angel investor, which is what we'll call kind of that, you know, that smaller investor. And every city has angel networks. You know, in Boston, there's Boston Harbor Angels. There's a bunch of different angel groups that these, you know, gentlemen and ladies that have been very successful, and they have groups where they listen to pitches every other week, and they all invest as a group. And when you do that, they add value too. Sometimes they give you advice. Sometimes but a lot of those are tech-based, so it's harder to crack in those for food. The venture capital firm that we used for the last company didn't invest in food, but I went to them for a strategic reason because they had a branding company inside of it. And I just convinced them that they needed to invest in food. So, but that was a much harder sell, you know, and private equity is usually a longer term kind of investment where they insert usually some management and they, as you said, find the levers to pull that make it a little bit more efficient. But again, you're going to give up control usually. You know, over here, you're going to give up control. In the middle, you can, you know, have your control. And over here, you know, he has all the control, but he has more risk. You know, he's more exposed. So you got to define your race. You know, what do you want to accomplish? And the last company, we thought the operating model could be replicated over hundreds of stores. And so we went in that direction to raise, you know, millions of dollars instead of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Does that answer your question? Yep. So actionable articulation. Take that with you, and how do you move someone to action? To do a deeper dive in you. Define your voice, which is another key element. And when I met with the Bain Capital guy, he pushed me on this. He's like, you know, what's your angle? What makes you so different? My voice, and my voice was, obviously I was excited, you know, I was passionate, but you need more than that. You know, how do you back that passion and excitement up? And I said, okay, well, we're going to grill all our crust, and we can cook a pizza in half the time. And so we can sell more slices per day. And we had a store in the Boston Garden, the kiosk, that we sell 365 transactions in 1 hour. So that was a transaction every 14, 15 seconds. So that was one area where I shined in that conversation with him. I said, well, we can do 365 transactions in 1 hour. And I know you can do that too, you know? And he was like, oh, Well, that made him probably wave off his assistant for another 15 minutes. You know, you have to have those little, like, you know, bullets that you can just hammer in someone's head and say, boom, well, our crust is, you know, this, or our operating model is, you know, we use 3 less people than the average pizzeria. You know, those are things that will trigger their mind to keep going and doing a deeper dive into yourself. So define your voice. What is it? Is it groundbreaking? Is it twist on traditional, like first to market? First to market is a big term. If you can say, hey, you know, we have this, it's harder to have a new sauce or a new crust in today's world, but if you invent something that's new, and in your market, wherever you are, if you say, hey, no one's doing this, like Roman pizza has exploded all over this country, you know? And the guys that got first in their city, you know, they have an edge. So that's another kind of key term that investors love to hear, like, hey, we're first to market on this, and, you know, we think that we got a 6, 8, 10, 12-month lead time on the next guy that's probably going to do this, you know, but we'll be first. Like Starbucks was first, Pete's was second, and Pete's could never catch Starbucks, you know, as much as they tried. In my mind still, Starbucks was, you know, they were the first kind of artisanal coffee chain to really go national. So what is your voice, you know, define it. Have all these things just nailed, and bring your pitch deck to as many people that you know that have kind of the expertise to read these, a banker, anybody, and go through as many red line versions as you can. I probably went through 25 red line versions, with the last one, well, they're always getting red line, to be honest with you, but the one at Bain Capital, the guy just massacred it. There was more red ink on these 15 pages I've ever seen in my life, but they're the most valuable pages I've ever received in my life in terms of raising capital. So get in front of people that scare you. If you have trouble talking to people about your numbers, you got to practice it, because you're gonna get hammered. You know, you're gonna get poked and prodded, and you got to be ready for it. So the pitch life. So this is kind of a life I've led with Melissa. Kind of drove her crazy over the last 15 years, because I'm the entrepreneur of the relationship. She's the business side. She kind of keeps everything together, but I'm the guy that kind of pushes the envelope. Like, I like to live with 2 feet in the unknown, and she is firmly in the known. And that's how our relationship, business-wise, has been so positive and fulfilling. Is I'm the guy out in the darkness, like, that's where you create stuff, and I'm living in that every day. And sometimes it's scary, and she kind of is the glue to keep it together. But the pitch life, you know, after we won 2014, we were very lucky to win the World Master title at the IPC, which is, you know, the top competition. And I had a bet with her. I'm like, all right, if we win this thing with this crust that we invented together, we had a handshake deal. Like, tomorrow, if I win it, I'm going to start pitching this thing like crazy. Like, I'm going to put the gas down if it wasn't already down. And we like set on this quest. And at the end of the quest, we didn't have a brand in the beginning. We didn't have a name. We just had a product and an operating model. And we raised about $8 million after about 4 or 5 months. And went on this crazy journey, you know, and now we're on a new journey. It's all these different, you know, ups and downs. But the pitch life is what made it happen for me. I mean, I lived it. You have to live it. If you're really in your mind wanting to go out and grow your company and raise capital, this stuff has to flow out of you. You have to live this life, and I call it the pitch life. You know, be in constant pitch mode. I mean, I would practice it on the guy in the elevator, the UPS guy. Like, anyone who asked me a question about the company, I literally would just go off for 20 minutes and just tell them about the bullets and how it was easier to operate. And, you know, we went all electric, and, you know, our utilities went down 20%, 30%. So I had them all ingrained in my head. It was like boom, 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 boom. And some people would be like, oh, wow, I want to learn more. But even if they didn't, my mind was practicing. I was training my mind to spit this stuff out in a fluid way where it was authentic. And I call that kind of the flow state, which you might have heard before. But, you know, when you live that pitch life, you're in constant pitch mode, and you have your voice, you have your definition, you have all your facts and your data and how you're different, your X factor, and just start practicing that. And just start talking to anyone who you can talk to about it. And it'll start to flow out of you. And when you get to that flow state, that's when you achieve authenticity. And if you could be authentic and in anything you do, your product story, how you raise money, how you talk to the customer, you'll be successful. You know, that's one thing I've learned after 20 years in this business. If your authenticity comes through, then you're so far ahead of it, because people these days want that authenticity of every aspect of your business. They want to know the founders are good to their employees. You know, perfect example, in the Boston area, we have this craft beer movement, and one of the best ones, I'm not going to say their name because I still respect them, you know, it came out that they were really bad to their employees. And they did some things that were not kosher and were not good, and it had a dramatic impact on their brand. And they're still reeling from it. And you can't go back and all of a sudden put pictures of your happy staff up on Instagram after that happens, because then it's even more unauthentic. And that's one thing you have to master, is authenticity in everything you do, especially if you're trying to raise money. You know, you have to be authentic, because it'll make your pitch more powerful. It'll make you more powerful in the end. You know, it creates confidence. It sounds unrehearsed. Unrehearsed is probably a big word for this slide. You know, if it just flows out of you as a passion kind of voice, then people get engaged in that. And that's one thing that I think I was good at. I'm not good at a lot of things. I'm gonna admit it now. I'm very flawed, but I was good at the passion side and knowing those defining parts of the pitch, and that's what probably kept me in the game of raising capital and then becoming kind of successful at raising capital. Is it sounded unrehearsed and it was confident. You know, confidence is really everything. But I must have pitched, 100 people in the minors before I got to that flow state, and then kind of graduated onto the majors, you know. And when I say majors, I'm talking about like that scary side of, you know, going into a boardroom, which never pitch in a boardroom, you know, because it's all figured out. You know, when you're on their turf, man, I was scared, you know. But when I got them into a kitchen, then the power was reversed. So that's another technique I really want. If you're going to raise money, do not do it in a boardroom. Do it in a kitchen where you're comfortable and you're making your product and your passion. You got flour on you. You know, that's where you've become successful, and that's where you should control your destiny, whatever it is, whether it's raising capital or making your customer happy. You know, we're all here because we're in control of our destiny. We start our own companies, which is a crazy thing to do, but you know, we find value in it. Any questions thus far? Yeah. I didn't use video. I had a pitch deck with a lot of pictures. I was very low tech. I would recommend video now. You know, we didn't really have any money to put into the pitch deck. It was just us developing it. So we took really good pictures. But I go back to, I did all these pitches for the last company in a kitchen. And I call it the Pit's Kitchen. And every one of you in every major city, you have manufacturers' reps, probably for your ovens that you're using or a grill that you're using. And they're beautiful test kitchens that manufacturer reps set up to sell ovens or grills or whatever. And I spoke to one of my reps in my area and said, listen, we're going to have people flying into this kitchen for the next 6 months, and they're all going to sign non-disclosures, and they're all going to listen to this pitch. And I teamed up with this manufacturer's rep, and these people flew in thinking it was my kitchen. And I didn't tell them it belonged to Ovention or Blodgett. You know, they didn't know that. I'm like, hey, we have a pitch kitchen in this town or this city, and here's the address. If you're interested in learning about the pitch, come in. And it was a spotless kitchen. It wasn't our restaurants, but it was a neutral place where I could shift the momentum and shift the confidence back onto myself, which was key. Because, I mean, we're all not boardroom. Maybe some of you are, but, you know, I don't like corporateness. I don't like boardrooms. And I felt as confident I think I am. I would go into boardrooms, and I was outnumbered, number one. And you feel out of place a little bit. I feel very home in a kitchen. I'm dealing with food, and that's where my passion comes across. And so I'm hoping if that's one thing you took today is if you're pitching, invite people in, make it feel like a supper club. That's kind of what I did. It was like a pitch supper. I invited all these people in from Texas, California. Before they walked through the door, I made them sign a non-disclosure and said, what you're going to see is going to change the pizza world. And we had people that were kind of competing to invest, which was crazy, you know? But pitch people on a platform that you're comfortable with, you know? And they're going to get you all, come into our office. No, hey, why don't you come into our home here at a restaurant or a manufacturer's pitch kitchen, you know, turn it into your kitchen for the day or 2 hours, you know? There's a question over here, yeah? So the last company we started, we didn't even have a name. So there's no value. And I think we came up with a number, something like we valued it like $10 million. I don't know how we got that valuation, but we did. And that was kind of the starting valuation of the company. And we took on most of the initial money for that as, you know, as, what do they call it? It starts out as debt and then it turns into equity. So it's like a convertible note. So that hedges the risk for an investor. That was VC, yeah. Convertible note is, if it tanks, you have a loan to these guys. You know what I mean? But if it takes off, they're like, oh, now we want equity. So they always get the best of both worlds. You know, you have to understand that. If you're gonna raise millions of dollars, you gotta fight like hell to know your stuff and go in there and kind of hold your ground if you think your idea is strong enough, you know? Yep.
How many rejections did you get initially, and how did you persevere through that too?
How many rejections, how many perseveres? So mentally, so I got a lot of rejections. So it took me 3 years to start the first company. So when I was 24, I got a 9-to-5 job. That lasted 3 months. I just quit. I can't live in a cubicle. My mind is not cut out for that. And it took me 3 years to learn how to write a business plan, and then a year to do that alone, and then it was 2 years of rejection. So I would say, you know, the first company, I probably got rejected 50, 100 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what mentally kept you going?
That's a good question. I'm not gonna say that. So how did I keep going? Which is a great question, right? So I gave a talk a couple years back, and I talked about the mind climb and how to mentally overcome negativity, you know? And there's all these steps that I created in my mind to kind of summit any negative occasion or action or anything. And it really comes down to the willpower. You have to go into this thing with unbreakable will. So it comes down to that one word, is 2 words, is willpower. And you have to go into it. Every time you get knocked down, I'm just gonna get back up. Every time I get rejected, I'm gonna get back up and learn from it. You know, and really take every pitch and every red line or every negative thought and be like, okay, I'm gonna listen to that. And you might not agree with all of it, but incorporate it into your next pitch. You know, as I said, you gotta practice in the minors and you're gonna get beat up. You're gonna get knocked down and you gotta get right back up every time. Or don't set out to do it. Because rarely do you give the first pitch and they're like, oh yeah, here's $2 million. You know, great. You know, I didn't get to a level of confidence and flow state for a little while. It took me a while. And then once I really figured out the mechanics of it and the mental side of it, I could turn it on like a switch. And then we invented this crust, and then, so the timing was right. I could turn it on, and I could just, you know, set the hook and reel people in. You know, but it took a long time. It took a lot of no's to get to that point. And I'm not gonna say it's gonna take a long time for you, but you have to have the willpower. Don't set out on this quest to raise money if your feelings are gonna get hurt because someone says no. Because you might get 20 no's before 1 yes. So you have to have strong will. Yes, you were next, sorry.
On your $10 million raise, so historically, PE won't come in for anyone with 60 or 70%. Where'd you come up with the rest of it?
So I was able to strike a deal for 50-50. So he asked, so the last company we raised several $1 million, And usually the PE money will take 75% or more. And I was fortunate enough to start out of the gate with 50-50.
So you had 3 million in the bank?
Yes. No, we raised 3 million. Like, so we didn't have anything in the bank. We had no name, we had no, but the deal structure was 50-50 out of the gate, which is not the norm in the VC, the Valley VC
So
world.
you syndicated your 3.5 and then got the other 3.5 from the private.
So we went to one private equity group, and we could go back to the well as much. So we did different tranches.
Oh, okay.
So tranches are, they'll come in and say, okay, we're going to give you $10 million. First tranche is going to be 2. When you need another 2, come back, and you almost have to prove that you need another 2. So you got to be battle ready to each tranche. Okay, why do you need 2? Well, we have 6 more locations we want to open, or 3 more locations. Another tranche comes in of money. But I was lucky. I didn't have control, but I had 50% of the equity. But that's because of the X factor. That's because of all those things I talked about in previous slides. The differentiation was strong enough to, I was like, no, I have 3 guys that are kind of, we're talking to, and I want more than the typical deal, But you got to do your homework, yeah.
Doug, on that second round, or the second company that didn't have a name on it yet?
Yep.
You projected about a value of about $10 billion. How realistic is that? Or is that what were you basing it on?
We were basing it on the product, the operating model, the market at the time. Like the personal pizzas was like the big craze, so it was a lot of market kind of, I should say, hysteria or momentum, because these people were selling franchises all over the country, and we thought we might have cracked the code, do a little bit of a different angle on it, and which drove up the value. That my job was to drive up the value. So those are the angles that I kind of went down. But ultimately, it was the product and the market opportunity and the team that we had starting to assemble. So it was all those little factors, and how realistic it was. When they value these things that have no name or no entity, it's kind of like that guy says 5 and I say 10. I think I said 20, and they thought I was crazy, and then we settled on 10. So it was almost like a negotiation in a way, which was crazy because the company didn't even exist. I was definitely swimming in ponds that I hadn't swam in before, trust me, and it was sometimes terrifying. Again, I'm gonna be honest with you. But I learned a lot, Now this last company we started, we're doing things differently, It's so we're trying to do the full spectrum of starting a company and how you raise capital, So, which is a perfect segue to this next slide, the art of partnership, right? So if you want to grow, you usually have to take on partners, whether it's an operating partner or a business partner or a capital partner. And you need those partnerships to be solid, and you got to do your homework. But those partnerships come in many forms. For me, obviously, your spouse has got to be on board because you're going to be insanely busy and you're going to be running around. If you raise $10 million, your life changes, right? You have to understand that going in, and you got to change your total mindset to be like, all right, I've signed up for this. Now you got to make it happen. So your team. We call our, managing partners, which are, if you call them a GM or whatever, but we like to make everybody a partner in our organization. So it gives them ownership. One of the biggest partnerships I have are with my vendors. So the company that we just started, I went the full circle. I went back to, we have no money raise, where we went back to our vendors. And it was totally unconventional, totally outside the box. But I went to like Cisco Foods, the biggest food distributor in the world, which I have a great relationship with. And I said, listen, this is what is in my head. I'm going to create these next 3 concepts. And they didn't even exist yet. And they're starting to exist now. And I said, I want to use all your resources. And in return, I'll document this whole entrepreneurial story. And I'll add value to Cisco, which is known as the big food distributor, which, in the pizza world they're not well kind of perceived, I would say. And they know this. So I kind of went to them with a hook and a pitch of like, hey, I want to create all these 3 concepts, and I need all your resources. And they've got the equipment people. They've got the guys that design kitchens, which are very expensive. They've got the graphic designers. They've got everybody in-house that are sitting there designed to help people like us. And no one taps it. Nobody calls them and says, hey, can I talk to Heather, the graphic designer? And we created our last logo with the Cisco Foods graphic designer. I went up to her office with a drawing and like, can you just make this look pretty? Within 3 hours, she had made the logo. And that's just saved me $10,000 by bringing it to a branding company. And it might not be the fanciest logo, but for us, we kind of went back to scrappy startup mode. And Cisco Foods, you know, they design all of our kitchens for free. You know, they have architects on staff. They have equipment advisors. They've got everybody on staff usually, if it's a big enough Cisco, that please go in and use their kitchens, their chefs. You know, we just used their corporate executive chef, and he helped us design all the menus. Yep. Yep. So you want to go to Cisco and you want to, okay, yeah. I didn't give up, we didn't give up anything. What they get out of it was, we told a story, we told a different story, like an entrepreneurial story, and we still tell it today. I'm talking about it now, and they get our business. So I say, hey, we're going to open these 3 concepts. You know, 2 of them I think are going to go to this store count pretty fast. One of them, I don't know, it's experimental. It's a sous vide concept. You know, I don't know if you guys know about sous vide cooking, but it's the first, we coined the word, trademarked the word sous viderie. So it's going to be a sous vide casual concept. It doesn't exist really. Everything's in front of the house, tanks and torches and smoke boxes, and they're looking at me like, you're crazy. But like, we want to be involved. So again, it goes back to that X factor and that voice. And they were like, hey, we'll give you all these resources. All we want is for just to remain your partner for food and equipment. I'm like, done. Yep. So the value that they gave to me was, so we're designing all these food halls and all these restaurants, and a kitchen designer is very expensive. To design what we do is usually costs about $15,000 to $20,000, and Cisco eats that cost because they have relationships with the kitchen designer because they sell equipment. So they have got these relationships, third-party relationships. Says, oh yeah, we got a guy on our retainer. Go talk to Kevin Cromwell in Stoughton, Mass. Phenomenal kitchen designer. Tell him all your ideas. I had them all sketched out on a piece of paper. They put them all in CAD, and I said, great, let's move the fry later here, let's do that. And that would have cost us thousands of dollars. That alone right there. Cisco picked up the tab. Graphic designer, designed my logo. That would have been probably $5,000 at least. So it's probably like a $30,000 to $50,000 value at the end of the day. And for the right idea, for the right people, for the right long-term kind of relationship, it's a good way to stay in control and stay scrappy, and you know, it's a unique way to go. You know, and we do that with the oven company. As I said, the pitch kitchen that I set up, that was the oven that we were going to use. And I said, listen, we're going to always use this oven. I'm going to stay loyal to you. And they allowed me, and their heads were spinning. Like every week, guys are flying in from Texas, and they're like, who's coming in this week? And they'd be like, this is crazy. Like, who are all these people? Where are they coming from? And they were part of our pitch team. They were like our assistants. They were just, you know, the doors were closed, and they'd be in there, like, helping me out. It was a blast. It was so much fun. So the vendors is a great resource that a lot of people don't tap, you know. Obviously, your landlord is your biggest partner, whether you like it or not. So pick good landlords, because we've had some really great ones and we've had some really bad ones. But whether you like it or not, they're one of your partners, you know, probably one of your biggest partners. So make sure you have a great relationship and you're always transparent, and it's worked out well for us and it's worked out bad for us. You know, we've seen both sides of that. Yep.
How could you possibly identify that prior to?
So in all these relationships, you got to do your due diligence on them. and that'll make them appreciate and respect you more. And so when we opened up in Harvard Square, you know, our landlord was notoriously tough. And I had talked to his tenants. I would go in and talk to his tenants. Like, hey, I'm thinking about opening up. How's so-and-so? How's he with this? If this problem happens, how's he reacted? If the place floods, what does he do? So you got to do your due diligence. You got to do your research. You know, I did that with Cisco before I signed up with them. I did that with all the investors that you know that I had come in. I did as much due diligence as I could on them as they did on me. You know, and some of them found out about it, and they were like, "Oh, that's great." That's all they do is due diligence on people, because they have capital, they want to put it to work. So they're trying to figure out who this guy is or who this girl is. So they're always doing it. So if you turn the table and do it on them, they're like, "Oh, wow," you know. I'll ask them, like, "Hey, do you have people I could talk to that you've invested in?" They're gonna be like, "What are you talking about?" No, like they're not gonna expect that. But always try and turn the tables as much as you can. You know what I mean? Because that's what they're trying to do to you. You know, they're not in these positions for, you know, just by luck. They're good at manipulating kind of relationships and deals, and they're all mostly good, but there's some bad. So you just got to be savvy. You got to make yourself savvy enough to navigate those waters. But do your due diligence on them, you know? And the Harvard Square one was good. Like we were honest with him, and we were always transparent, and he helped us out a lot when times got tough. And that is critical. Your landlord is one of your biggest partners. As I said, construction. All my subcontractors ended up investing in a couple stores, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad. You know, if the store doesn't do well, it's a tough conversation to have. But you have to have those conversations. That was one area that I was not good at. I did not like having the bad conversations, but you got to have them. Trust me, you have to have them. You know, you got to look at all the key players as, you know, in your business and your life, and you have to treat them kind of the same, because, you know, the work-life dynamic, we all work a lot, it's kind of the same. You know, our work is our life is our work, and you have to kind of maximize the power out of both of those to really take it to the next level. So you got to pick your partnerships well. Any other questions on partnerships? So leverage those manufacturers, reps in your area. You can use those kitchens whenever you want. If you buy Blodgett or Baker's Pride, they have kitchens. Those reps in your area have kitchens. They're all beautiful. They're all updated equipment. Go in there. Most of them have their own chefs, which should be helping you design the next big idea. So there's all these relationships that we've created. We have probably in Boston, we have 4 relationships with equipment reps with 4 different kitchens that we could access at any given time for a multitude of reasons. Whether it's a pitch, whether it's test a new product, test a new piece of equipment, we've got this great little network that we're always in these kitchens, you know? So we're coming up on, so partnership finesse, right? We always keep a family culture. To me, that's key, is keeping the culture as close and as personable as you can. Keep it as transparent and integrity driven, you know, always. You know, play to your strengths and always delegate your weaknesses. I have a lot of weaknesses, as I said, and I've been lucky enough to have my wife, number one, has no weaknesses, and she's A++ type A, but, you know, we've had great partners and great managing partners and great, you know, people that have worked around us that, you know, humility is the ultimate, you know, good characteristic of an entrepreneur. You got to delegate. If I can't do it that well, then Nick can do it better. Then give it to Nick. You know, good communication, you know, always define your roles and responsibilities. You know, loyalty to vendors is key. You take care of them, they're going to take care of you over the long run. You know, one of the big terms I live by is replace expectations in your mind, and, you know, replace them with strategies. You know, on the personal side, you replace expectation with appreciation, your life changes. In the business side, you replace expectation with, you know, a real good strategy to coach people along and make them stronger. You'll succeed in the end. You know, don't sit there and complain about it and feel sorry for yourself. You know, or have an expectation of somebody up here that works with you that they only might be here, but as long as that here is affecting your business and your life in a positive way, maybe here's okay for that type person. You know, and they're all not going to be, you know, at the top of the range. You have to kind of manage the expectation of people and situations. I found that to be very important. Any questions on that? I know we're getting to the end, and if you had any questions at the end, I want to make sure you have time for that. Identify your ideal partner. So for the last raise, I identified a firm that had everybody in-house. They had the money guys, they had the creative guys, they had the copywriters, they had the web people. It was a one-stop shop. And that's why I ultimately targeted them. And it was a great, it provided so much value, and it was phenomenal in the long run. And we created the brand under one roof. We got the money, got the creative people, we got the web design, the video people. It's under one roof. And in the long run, it was a great target that we set our sights on, and in the long run, it was very good. You know, but understand the difference. You know, a strategic investor, which is what I went after, or just somebody that's going to give you money, that's going to kind of live across the country and, you know, have no impact on your day-to-day operations and just wants a check. That's good too if you want that. But, you know, identify what you want out of a partner. Do you want a strategic? Do you want someone to come in and do your creative and do this and do that? You know that going in. Angel money, which is, you know, hands off. We've done that too, and that works as well. But you got to have your ducks in a row on that, and you got to have a team in place to make it happen. Do you have any guys questions on the type of investor? Because that's kind of key. See ya, thank you. You know, that is kind of key on who you're going to talk to. You know, as a gentleman in the pink shirt, he said, you know, he's just starting out or he's going to a small raise. Maybe you shouldn't go unless you've got the next, you know, light bulb idea. Maybe you go smaller type, angel type money, or just a small capital partner. You know, and there's tons of guys out there that you can go to and say, hey, I'll give you X percentage on your money. You know, if you only need $300,000, you say, okay, I'm going to give you X percentage, and then it'll kind of dwindle down after you get paid down, and it's kind of a loan. You know, there's a lot of capital sitting out there right now, and people are looking to put it to work in a multitude of different ways. Be creative. You know, we did a lot of deals where we paid 60% of the cash flow back to the investor until he was paid back, and then it flipped to 40, which trails down to 20 at the end of the day. You know, when he's returned his investment twice. So there's millions of different ways to structure a deal where you don't have to go in and just give up equity. You know, I would advise against, you know, just going in and doing that right out of the gate. Try and structure it where the guy gets his money back and he's happy, but you're still in control. Yep.
There's so much to this, really appreciate it. It's very new, almost overwhelming.
Yeah.
Where do we find a strategic investor?
That's a good question. I started in the angel kind of networks, the angel investor networks in Boston. And you know who are really good conduits to investors are lawyers. You know, there's a couple of law firms in the city of Boston, and you know, all these angel investors have really good lawyers, and you know, doing your research on lawyers and friends of, you have to network, you know, and in Boston there's a couple of big law firms that I had kind of met along the way, whether I just called and introduced myself, and I'm like, hey, I'm looking to tap into some angel networks, and if you're personable and your ideas are good, they are good conduits to the right people. Because there's a lot of doctors, there's a lot of retired tech guys in Boston, for an example, that have these networks, they have capital, and they do it as kind of a hobby. They like, we have all this money, and we like to stay active in our minds and our wallets, and they have groups, and they're usually really great people. And if you can get in front of them, then and this is what happened. I'll give you a perfect example. I got in front of one group, and they were tech focused, but they're like, hey, call Larry. Larry loves doing deals like this. I called him, and he exposed me to 3 other guys. So you just have to kind of follow it and be willing to talk to anybody. But you know, you got to go after, you know, lawyers, angel groups, bankers. You kind of have to root it out. You can't just go online and be like, oh, let's look up a strategic investor. You know.
Follow up, even if you're in a small town, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I talked about this in Atlantic City, and someone had the same question. They're in a small town in Kansas, and sure enough, though, they did email me like a month later. We found a small angel group. It was like 50 miles away in another larger, kind of smaller city, but they did find a group that they got into and talked to that had connections, and they liked them, and they created a relationship. You might have to travel, a little bit, but Idaho is amazing. You know what I mean? There's got to be some guy out there that retired on a fly fishing farm that he's tied into a network. You have to dig it up. You have to go out there and make it happen. You can't just Google it and be like, find somebody. You have to pitch, you have to talk, you have to dig it up, and you have to make an impression at the end of the day. You have to make that impression that says this lawyer in Boston said, oh, geez, this is a really good idea. And you got the energy and you got the passion. You should go talk to this angel group, which I did, which went to here, went to there, and then, the last pitch I did to kind of put the money over the top was I took the pizza oven to this guy's office. This is an electric pizza oven. And I called this superintendent of the building. I'm like, do you have a NEMA 60, 50 amp plug in your kitchen? And the guy's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. My name's Doug. I have a meeting with, Steve, and I'm going to come in and use that plug. And I made pizzas in his kitchen for this whole company. Massive real estate company. 100 people. And I just went in there 2 hours before the meeting and just started making pizzas. And then finally he came in after like 2 hours and was like, I heard you making pizzas in here. I don't like pizza. I'm like, well, you're going to like this. And he liked it. But what that did, that was an angle of to win over the people around him first. And he ended up writing $1 million check. And that's a true story. It was crazy. But that's kind of the guerrilla mentality that you kind of have to have sometimes. But there's people in Idaho, I know there is. Dentists have a lot of money, first of all, and optometrists, and they love doing these kind of things, trust me. There's people out there, you just have to find them, Yep.
So with all these different deal structures,
Yeah.
where can you find out more information on that? Like if you did want to partner with a dentist,
Yeah.
how would you set
So a great structure for that would be like a 60-40 kind of flip deal where you're confident in your location, your cash flow. Like, hey, Tim, I'm going to give you 60% of the profit after you're paid and your healthy business is paid. I'm going to give you 60% of that until your investment is returned, and then it's going to flip to 40 for you decide the time frame. And then after that time frame, it goes down to 20. And then you can tail it down to, I think the last deal we did, it went down to 10% after a certain amount of years. So they set a residual at that point. But they have already made twice their money, 3 times. They've already done very, very well. And then you retain all the control, and they're happy. And they're going to get 60% of your cash flow, after profit and taxes, until they're paid back. You just have to prove to them that you have the cash flow there to get that money returned. In a platinum status would be under 24 months. If you could say your investment's going to be returned under 24 months, you're way ahead of the game. And if you could do that, then you could raise money all day long.
So a lot of situations are different.
Yeah.
Every deal is probably
Yeah.
try to find out how you can leverage that or find out how you can present that.
Where did you come up with these ideas in the first place of the 60-40?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not uncommon. They're not uncommon, really. You don't see them all the time, but they're good deals. If you have a good location, if you've got cash flow. I mean, we've got a kiosk in the Prudential Center in Boston that nets 30%. And those investors, they're like, can you please go more of these? Because they're getting, a great return, and that deal is the 60-40 deal, and we just finished paying them back. So now it flips to 40, and then after they get another return factor out of that, then it goes down to like 10 or 15. But they're extremely happy, and we didn't give up any control. They have no say. They're basically members, not managers, in the operating agreement. And the operating agreement is a standard operating agreement that any good lawyer will have in their Rolodex or their portfolio. And then you come up with the terms. It's all about the terms of the deal. But in our operating agreement, if you have them as a member and not a manager, then they're members. So they're along for the ride, and so I don't necessarily know where you research that. I mean, you can try and Google it, but honestly, we kind of came up with terms that we talked to the investors about. I'm like, hey, listen, what do you guys think about this? And they were like, phew, this is phenomenal. And that's how crazy those got funded. A lot of stores was that way. We're growing throughout the South right now in Atlanta area. And we just went with one investor. We partnered with one investor for that one, but we've kind of done the whole gamut. And those 60-40, we did one for 80-20. We did one of the first ones for 80-20. We gave them 80% of the cash flow. And they were, and then we had 20, which kind of sucked. But we were young and we didn't deserve the 60-40 deal yet. You know what I mean? So we had to kind of give up more in the beginning. But as you build value and you have your brand value and hey, I'm worth it. We're worth it. Our team's worth it. Our product's worth it. This is the deal. And you got to maybe hold true to it. If you believe in it that strong enough, then hold true to the 60-40. Don't go the 80-20 where we were super aggressive, like we want to grow. And that's how we got in the beginning. That's how we were getting deals done. So I don't know where you get a blueprint for it. You can always ask us, Always feel free to ask. I share everything. Yeah. 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 I mean, a lot of them like the residual can go down to 5% of the cash flow. It's really up to you, but we never set up a deal where they got totally out. We haven't gotten to that part of the spectrum yet, but we structured it to where it tailed down, where it was always healthy. They got their money back, number one, then they got, 20% return goes down to a 12% return. Anything over 10% is a great return on your investment. And if it kind of flatlines down the bottom at 6 to 10%, then that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, so I think the last one was it was triggered by the multiple of getting their money back. I think once they got their money back twice or half after they've been paid back, it went down to X percentage. So it wasn't triggered by time necessarily, it was triggered by a return, So, yeah.
Would it be mistaken to say that the equity, which is the equity in the company, is that matched to 8%?
No, so none of those deals we're talking about right now have any equity involved. It's all cash. Yes. Yes. It's basically a profit sharing operating agreement. So there's no equity involved. So it's a standard operating agreement, and you really kind of, the terms page, that's where you negotiate. So they're considered a member and not a manager. A manager can say, hey, why'd you change your sauce? I'm like, well, it's a better sauce. It's a better tomato. We get it from California. Or member, not manager, yeah. Manager has different rights in the operating agreement. Yep. But if they're a member, they're kind of, right, Melissa? Wouldn't you? That's correct? Yeah. Again, we always refer to her. And it sometimes it comes down to the word and then the interpretation of the word. So you have to write it up correctly. Because a member is, from what we've learned and what we've experienced, is that they're kind of a member in it. They're not a manager. We're the managers. Yes, we call the shots. We manage. Nope. No. Yep. Yes. Members listed, John, Pat. They're listed as members. They had a percentage of cash flow. Again, you negotiate the terms. You know what I mean? You don't say equity. You say, hey, you get 40% or 60% until you pay back, blah, blah, blah. You have that written in stone, and that can be attractive to a lot of people. LLCs? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not a percentage deal of the gross. It's the net profit, which is key, because you don't want to promise off the gross, because you got to pay everything. You know, pay your taxes and pay your labor and your food. Yep. Well, the last company we gave out 50% of the equity, so we're not against it. No, you have to know what you're getting yourself into, and be okay with it. In your soul, in your life, like whatever, if you give up control and 50%, you have to understand that someone could come in and change all of your recipes, which happened to me. They came in and they hired one guy, he came in and changed everything. Everything was written in stone, it was not. Everything was changed. And I did not have the power to stop it. The culture changed, the food changed, everything changed. And you have to be willing mentally to accept that. You know, if you work 20 years and you got all these recipes, you know, and then I need to have all these stores, but you don't at the end of the day. You need to have a great living and a great family and the least amount of stress as you can. That to me is the meaning of happiness. You don't need 50 stores. I thought that one day. You don't. You need a great living. You need to have the freedom to do whatever you want, because we bust our asses. And you need to have great staff to allow that freedom. And you need to have a good family life if you have family. And you need to live the life that you want to live on your terms. That's the meaning of success. Not, I need to be in New York City or Delaware or Philadelphia. Nightmare. How do I manage one store in Philadelphia? You know, not a good decision. So, a lot of good lessons there. It's all about your definition of happiness. What do you want to achieve? Start there. Yep.
The only business I spoke to are only equity. I've never considered a discount payback plan. So you're suggesting I return the funds as soon as possible, that's the first step, then they start getting paid that profit chunk over a certain period of time. And why not at some point tail off the number?
You certainly can. And I would recommend doing that.
Why didn't you guys?
I think we might have tried in negotiating, and they say, hey, listen, you need the capital. We want a little piece forever. But you can put a 10-year term on it. You know what I mean? So if you can tail off to nothing after they're fat and happy, then that's only fair. We just didn't have, we just didn't get that negotiated. But we tailed down to 5 or 10% at the end of the day, you know, which was sweet for them. They've already gotten their money back twice at that point. You know, so it was all extra gravy at that point. So if you don't have to give up equity, don't give it up. No. But it's not necessarily a bad thing either. Like, we created a brand. That equity was worth it. It really was. We created so much value. So, but that we wanted to grow the brand pretty extensively. You know what I mean? So it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just what you want to do. You know?
Is it part of your exit plan with those guys still attached when you sell the company? When they get paid out again based off the
They get paid first because they're a preferred shareholder. Me, you as a founder is common stock. So the preferred shareholder always gets taken care of first. So you have to sell for a big multiple because those guys get cleaned out first and then you get cleaned out second, you know? So that's where equity gets a little tricky. You know, they get their money back first. That's the bottom line. So if they invested $10 million and the company sells for $10 million, you get nothing. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. What was that? Yeah, I can give you a card, yeah. Yeah. Yes. It's a percentage. So we did 60% of the cash flow after everything's been paid. I was paid, she was paid, everything's been paid, You take 60% of that, give it to the investor, you keep 40. Yeah. So by that time, hopefully you don't have anybody that's in the game and you've already cleaned them out. You know what I mean? but they're 5%. Technically, they get 5% of that cash. Yeah. Yes. With a team. Yep. 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 Yeah. Well, if you're talking about an equity deal, then it's the percentage of equity that that person has at the end of the day, at the exit. Like if I have 5% of the last company still, I technically get 5% of that exit. Yes. You have to build up the value so someone wants to buy it, you know, and then you exit. And that's the challenge, you know. Yep. We good? You guys feel good about it? Don't be scared. You know, we all want to grow. You just got to figure out what path you want to take. You know, we've taken all of them. We've done a lot of crying, thrown up a million times. So don't be scared about it. You know, if you believe in it strong enough, then do it. You know, go make it happen. Don't slow down. You only live once. You got to make it count. So I think that's it. I think we're over by 25 minutes. All right, thank you. Thank you.